Hey everyone, it's Joe Beethoven, and if you take away anything from this review other than my thoughts on this game, it's that my ethics go out the window as soon as there's a really good sale. That's right, despite being hesitant for a very long time about playing Max Payne 3 because Remedy was not involved, it went on sale for like $6, so I bought it. I'm sorry, but ethics are no match for a really good sale. What can I say? Loyalty? Who cares when it's only $6? Plus, since Remedy is in the early stages of developing the remakes for the first two Max Payne games, which I'm very excited about, I thought I might as well experience Max's entire story in preparation for these games. Well, was it worth the $6? I mean, almost anything is worth $6. I mean, anything not evil, right? Okay, pretend I didn't say that. Point being, $6, game that's supposed to be pretty great. I've heard about it for a very long time, so I thought, what the hey? So now the question is, does Max Payne 3 live up to the decade's worth of hype? Does it stack up to its predecessors? Is it a worthwhile experience on its own? Why did Max shave his beautiful head of hair? That's actually a few questions, but forget that. Let's get into it. So let's get right into it with the story. Now, if you watched my previous Max Payne reviews, or more likely have played them for yourself, you know that the first two Max Payne games stood out from the rest of the action game crowd thanks to Remedy's stellar storytelling and character work. Remedy was just really ahead of the pack. They crafted an incredible world with a super engaging and relatable protagonist, and you just kept wanting to see what happened next. You kept wanting to get to the next awesome comic book cutscene, the next incredible slow-mo gunfight. You were invested and engaged. At least, I'm assuming, if you're anything like me, that you were. But now that Rockstar has taken over with this third entry, the storytelling goes in a very different direction. Is this new direction for the better, or is the core of Max Payne lost in translation? Sadly, in my opinion, it's the latter. Now, it starts off okay enough. We have Max arriving in Sao Paulo for his new job as a security guard, a private security contractor for the Bronco family. Max is still Max. His character is kept intact. He still feels like himself. And that goes along with, of course, his pill addiction, heavy drinking, not really caring for his own life or for his own safety. He definitely feels like himself. The basic setup of the game is that the family Max is supposed to protect starts to get heavily targeted by mysterious enemies, and Max has to protect them. The wife, Fabiana, gets taken. He has to try and rescue her. People come to try to kill the husband, Rodrigo. He has to protect him. Lots of situations involving protecting this family from these unknown enemies. That's really it. That's really the setup for the entire game. It's kind of a weaker version of Man on Fire meets Fast and Furious. And I'll talk more about the Fast and Furious stuff later. There's just a lack of any clear direction for the game for pretty much 10 chapters. It just feels like Max goes from this place to this place, gunfight to gunfight, and throughout this, he never really succeeds at anything. He's actually like a complete failure. He relies entirely on drugs and alcohol, and even though, yes, this does sort of line up with who he's been so far, he's never allowed it to stop him from doing the right thing before, and it feels like he's so concerned with his own pain throughout that he allows it to prevent him from doing anything for anyone else, and it makes him less likable until there's a shift much later in the story, and it takes too long to get there. It feels like the plot is really thin and just filled with Max failing. He fails at this, he fails at that. He just keeps failing over and over again, and that's why the story's as long as it is, because it's just a series of Max completely sucking at his job. That's really all there is to it. On top of that, there is no real development for most of the side characters, with the exception of Raul Pasos and Giovanna. They're kind of important. They don't even get that much development, but they are pretty important to the story, and I do like them. But all the other characters are just kind of there, and especially for the quote-unquote twist villains. The twist is weak, it's just not that shocking or impressive, and the villains have almost no personal connection to Max whatsoever. Later, when the twist is revealed, Max literally says stuff like, Whoa, it was that guy I saw for a little bit earlier. I don't even know his name. I can't believe it was him all along, even though I didn't know him at all. I can't believe it either, because if you hadn't mentioned him right now, I wouldn't have even remembered he existed. Now, there are attempts to make the story more interesting through the use of non-linear storytelling. The problem is, it's not used for any legitimate reason. The story could have been told in chronological order, and it would have had the exact same effect. The reveal of why Max is in Sao Paulo has something to do with his crime boss back in New York, but it has no bearing on the main story. It could have just been used as the start of the game, and it wouldn't have changed anything. Why did this reveal get reserved for later in the game when it doesn't really matter? Now, Rockstar does make some cool choices when it comes to storytelling. The graphic novel cutscenes have been replaced with long, regular cutscenes, and while I miss the whole comic book art style, Max's distorted vision and the freeze frames, it creates a really cool visual style, and the graphics still look great even by today's standards. So the presentation is often incredible. I often just loved looking at the cutscenes, loved looking at the world. But the cutscenes are often way too long. This is due to the fact that they are all actually hidden load times for the game. Now, I'm not against long cutscenes. I love Final Fantasy, I love Metal Gear Solid. But in Max Payne 3's case, instead of the story moving forward at a natural pace, the cutscenes are as long as they need to be to load the game. This leads to often repetitive narration and dialogue from Max, where he will restate exactly what he just told us in order to avoid dead air in the next hidden load time. The story feels artificially extended to fit in all of Rockstar's ideas for set pieces, explosions, action scenes, and that just feels like the wrong way to do it, in my opinion. It just feels like the story should be as long as it needed to be. The cutscenes shouldn't be made longer just for load time's sake, and you shouldn't have a bunch of action scenes just for the sake of spectacle. There are more positives, though. James McCaffrey is absolutely incredible, as always, as Max Payne, and he gets more opportunities to display emotional variety. There are some truly impactful moments thanks to his performance. The other voice actors are actually all pretty great across the board, and a couple of the characters are real standouts, like the aforementioned Raul Passos, Max's new bestie. The new setting in Sao Paulo is fantastic and adds new color to the primarily dark tones of the previous Max Payne games. The narration can also be brilliant, at times even reaching the same hyperbolic noir detective heights that Remedy did. Overall, though, the story is just really thin. It's light on likable or even memorable characters, the villains are almost non-existent, and Max spends the majority of the game being an absolute failure at everything he attempts, with only the slightest bit of success at the end. Speaking of which, it even manages to have a super abrupt ending, just like most Remedy games. But Rockstar's brilliant idea was to be even more abrupt. Not a great plan. Rockstar either wasn't capable or was not interested in continuing Max's story in a way that actually built on Remedy's foundation, or could even stand alone as its own satisfying experience, which is just a huge disappointment for me. All of that negative stuff aside, now we get to talk about Max Payne's classic third-person shooter bullet time action gameplay, and this is where Max Payne 3 gets very interesting and sort of confusing. Based on what I have said so far, you have probably guessed that I don't like Max Payne 3 at all. And I wouldn't blame you for thinking that, but it's just not true because Max Payne 3's gameplay is essentially flawless. It is the ultimate evolutionary refinement of Remedy's gameplay foundation. It trims the fat in all the right ways, boiling bullet time combat down to the bare essentials and making those essentials better than ever before. I would argue that Max Payne 3 is the best gameplay the series has ever produced. And that is saying a lot given how fantastic Max Payne 2 already was. The shooting feels tighter and has more kick, the bullet time and shoot dodge systems are more intuitive and epic than ever before, and the addition of the bullet cam means every gun battle ends with incredibly satisfying punctuation. Plus, the new cover system adds great levels of tactical depth, and the melee mechanic gives a fantastic and brutal new method of dispatching your foes. And the extra modes and challenge grinds give great and enjoyable incentive to replay the game over and over. Even as I am speaking to you, I feel compelled to go back and complete more challenges and see by what new methods I can cause mayhem in slow motion. All in all, this is the best way to experience Max Payne's signature gameplay, and I applaud Rockstar for making this happen. However, despite Max Payne 3's gameplay brilliance, there are still a few nits that I could pick. For one, the game's storytelling missteps highlight the fact that the gameplay does not have much variety. The game essentially boils down to super long hidden load time followed by a lot of diving through the air and shooting, and then another hidden load time. Other than a few exceptions, such as the amazing walk through the favela and the vehicle sequences, you'll be doing the same thing over and over again for about 10 to 12 hours. I personally enjoyed it throughout, but I could understand this getting old for some people. Another issue I had is that some of the set pieces just didn't feel like Max Payne at all. The boat sequence in particular feels more like Fast and Furious, with Max's boat flying through the air in the middle of a huge explosion as he slow-mo dives and shoots people. And of course there's Max in a car trying to take down an airplane on the runway. I could just picture Dom Toretto and his family doing the exact same kinds of things. Other sequences feel like they were lifted directly from Uncharted and other action titles. It kind of feels like Rockstar was trying to imitate other big-budget action movies and games rather than trying to develop a Max Payne game. My favorite levels in the game were actually the flashback sequences with Max and Raoul fighting through the streets just like in the old days. The combat felt smaller scale, more close quarters and personal, just like the classic games. These chapters felt like a window into what Max Payne 3 could have been. Also, the melee can't really be used on higher difficulties, and the sprinting can be a little clunky, but those are minor issues. All of that aside, I can't fault Rockstar for being ambitious, and they deserve huge props for creating absolutely pitch-perfect Max Payne gameplay. Max Payne 3 is easily one of the greatest gameplay experiences I've ever had, and I want to play more of it right now! Before we get to the verdict, this is a Max Payne game, which means we need to take a brief moment to talk about the adult content. Now, there is a high probability that you have already played this game and know what I'm going to say, but just in case you haven't yet and are considering playing it for the first time, I want to provide you with the kind of content advisory I would want someone to give me. This is not me telling you what to do, this is me preparing you just in case you are like me and wish to avoid certain types of explicit content. The majority of the game is fairly clean. It definitely has more cursing than the previous two games, and the violence has been kicked up a notch thanks to the graphical upgrade, but these things are to be expected. However, there is one scene that contains a fair amount of nudity and explicit content. When Max is in the favela and is about to enter this building, I would recommend covering the screen, as you can't skip the cutscene right away. Some of the dialogue is important in this scene as well, but it is surrounded by explicit imagery and sexual acts taking place. To be clear, I'm not telling you what to do, I am merely telling you what I would want to know before playing this game. These are the kinds of things I personally choose to avoid seeing. That's all. So what's the verdict? Well, that's actually a really difficult question to answer. On the one hand, I was very disappointed in Max Payne 3's approach to storytelling. I found it to be shallow, disjointed, and unfulfilling. On the other hand, Max Payne 3 is one of the greatest gameplay experiences I've ever had, and I really can't get enough of playing it over and over again. Where can a game like this land on a traditional rating scale? I honestly just couldn't figure out how to properly rate this game, so I felt compelled to finally introduce my own personalized rating system. That's right, from now on I will be ditching the traditional numbers-based rating format and using a system I like to call the Masterful Scale. The scale breaks down as follows. The top level is, of course, Masterful. This rating is reserved for games that I find to be near flawless, the best of the best, and more often than not, these games will be some of my personal favorites. Games like Alan Wake and Until Dawn would fall perfectly into this category. The next grade down is Wonderful. These are the games that are very good, great even, but have just enough flaws and issues to keep them back from true masterful status. Games like Halo Infinite and The Medium would fit nicely here. Below that we have Passable, which covers all games that are just fine. These games are usually okay, they might even be quite good, but they are also deeply flawed and are definitely not for everyone. Crossfire X and The Quarry would be prime examples of this grade. Even lower than that, we have tolerable, which is where we start getting into much more negative territory. These are the games that are at best alright, but often trend towards being straight up bad. However, they have just enough going for them to be slightly worthwhile to some people. Marvel's Avengers definitely belongs here. Finally, we have the Mark of Death, the word of total destruction, the absolute lowest rating I can give a game, unbearable. These games are the worst of the worst, the kind of games that are unmistakably and unforgivably bad. These games belong on the trash heap, and no one save for the truly unique gaming palate will find any enjoyment here. I've never reviewed an unbearable game before, but I'm sure I will be in the future. God help me. Alright, now that I have spent all this time over-explaining my new rating system, it is finally time to reveal where Max Payne 3 lands on the Masterful scale. Max Payne 3 may have perfect gameplay, but the countless storytelling blunders place the game firmly at the passable level. This game has flashes of brilliance, but it is overall just fine. For me, it's not great, it's not terrible, it is somewhere in the middle. I still enjoy it. I will probably keep playing it, but I can guarantee I will not be watching the cutscenes, and I will skip them as soon as the next gameplay sequence loads. It is a mixed bag of an experience, and that is why it just cannot rise above passable for me. Alright, that was video review number 15, and I'm so excited to be doing this again with you guys, to be playing games, discussing games, analyzing trailers and information. It's really fun, and I'm so appreciative of all the positive feedback I've gotten recently on videos and your encouragement to keep making videos. It means a lot, guys, and it's what keeps me going. Even after I've taken a long break and lost track of this channel, you guys keep me going, and I really appreciate it. I will try to be more consistent with my uploads in the coming weeks and months. I'm going to get content out to you as quickly as possible. I thank you for your patience, and I thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like it if you did, share it, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any upcoming Masterful content. Maybe I'll do a Max Payne ranking at some point, but really that would be almost pointless because if you've watched my reviews for the games, you would be able to guess what the ranking would be. I haven't really hidden my feelings on each entry of the series. However, I am getting back to my supermassive games and eventual ranking, and I want to finally do my Uncharted videos as well as my Final Fantasy XIII project. There's a lot of great stuff coming soon. I hope you'll stick with me on this journey for as long as we are able to do this together. I really appreciate you all, and I can't wait to see what we do next. Alright, that's all for now. God bless you guys, I'll catchphrase you later, and this mantra keeps me going. Alan Wake 2 is coming. Bye!